All right, back on the Young Turks. Now we're going to talk to Adele Stan. She is the Washington Bureau Chief of Alternate.org. She's also co-editor of the book Dangerous Brew, Exposing the Tea Party's Agenda to Take Over America. Adele, first, welcome to the Young Turks. Great to have you here.
Great to be here. Thanks.
All right. Second of all, how did you guys write this book so quick? I mean, I was told that the violence that comes from right-wing rhetoric took everyone by surprise, that no one could have seen it coming. How did you write the book in, what, a day and a half? Or did you write this earlier?
Well, I mean, I'm very fortunate to have, an editor, my boss, Don Hazen, who let me run with the Tea Party story beginning back in 2009, before anybody was really taking it very seriously. But I had covered the religious right, and I saw echoes of that in the Tea Party movement, and thought that it was going to become a very serious player on the American political landscape. So we started covering that movement, very early, and assigning a lot of pieces. The book is, I've written, I think 3 or 4 pieces in that book, but there's also a lot of work that we assigned to other reporters, or that we reprinted from other progressive websites. So we were able to put together an anthology that really chronicles the movement from its inception.
All right. Now, when it comes to Jared Loughner, he's not a Tea Party guy, right?
No, he is not. And I think that people on the left, need to be very cautious about how they frame what has gone on here. He is not a Tea Party member that we know of. But that is not to say that the climate that has been fostered by the Tea Party movement and figures further to the right of the Tea Party have not, influenced or at least affirmed some of his violent impulses. And we don't know that for sure, but I think it's a safe assumption to say that if you're living in a political climate that is steeped in violent rhetoric, and you're a disturbed person with violent impulses, that, you could easily be affected by that. In fact, there's research that, actually speaks to that.
All right. Adele, today in covering this story, I laid out the case that, that of course, this guy's a psycho. There are psychos out there. But what the right wing does is that they take those psychos and they direct them. They direct them in a certain direction, right? And it's not to attack conservatives. It's not to attack Republicans. It's always to attack liberals, Democrats, or the government, right? And we showed case after case where the right wing, either commentator or politician, says people need to be targeted, and then you see a right-wing psycho taking action, right? So as I was doing the research, the stuff that you have in this, in what you wrote recently, really struck me, because you had the quotes from a gathering on April 19th of 2010. First, tell us what that gathering is before we get into the quotes.
Sure. This was a rally that was held at the foot of the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C., and it was a gun owners' march. They called it a Second Amendment march. It was actually a rally, and it was of several thousand gun owners. And, speaking from the stage were such figures as Larry Pratt, who is the president of Gun Owners of America. And Pratt is actually, one of his claims to fame was that he once addressed a white supremacist gathering. And he was quite vitriolic. Also on the stage was Representative Congressman Paul Brown of Georgia, who was recently reelected, who basically called members of his own colleagues domestic enemies, and pointed down the mall at the Capitol building and called these people enemies, Congress people, enemies of the state.
Adele, why did they pick the April 19th date?
Well, April 19th, of course, is the 15th anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing. And the Oklahoma City bombing took place on the anniversary of the Waco siege of the Branch Davidian complex by the FBI, which ended very badly, and it was pretty not particularly well managed. A lot of people died, and it became sort of a cause célèbre of the far right, as an example of the government, overreaching its bounds and being tyrannical.
So, I mean, this doesn't get any more brazen. They're doing it almost in commemoration of the Oklahoma City bombing.
Well, here's what they would tell you. What they would tell you is that, April 19th was also the anniversary of the firing of the first shots of the American Revolution at Lexington and Concord. So...
Right.
But of course, Concord was much less a topic of discussion from the podium than was Oklahoma City.
Yeah, nonsense. Okay, and to me, I can't believe they're brazen enough to do it on that day. But when you read their quotes, you see that, they're definitely brazen enough to do that. So tell us what Representative Paul Brown said. I mean, this is a United States congressman. What he said at that rally.
I can read that to you right out of the article I've done for Alternate that's up today. So Brown, a Republican, sees the Civil War looming on the horizon. Quote, "Fellow patriots, we have a lot of domestic enemies of the Constitution, and they're right down the mall in the Congress of the United States, and right down Independence Avenue in the White House that belongs to us," Brown told the crowd. Quote, it's not about my ability to hunt, which I love to do. It's not about the ability for me to protect my family and protect against criminals, which we have the right to do, but it's all about us protecting ourselves from a tyrannical government of the United States. That is what he said at the foot of the Washington Monument to a crowd of gun owners. And meanwhile, at the same time, which I didn't get to in this piece, there was a concurrent rally just across the river in Virginia that some of the gun the gun community, if you will, leaders held in Virginia, because in D.C. you can't carry firearms, but you can do so in Virginia. So they wanted to have an armed rally.
Right. And he directs these gun owners to down the mall to domestic enemies of the state, the Democrats.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's calling them, he's just saying Congress, but he does say the White House, which belongs to us. In other words, it doesn't belong to the occupants. And and he also, uses, whenever you hear this word tyrant or tyrannical, that's a very loaded word, because what they are doing, they're coding that word is coded, and what it means is that it harkens back to the American Revolution, because the American Revolution was an armed overthrow of a tyrannical regime. If somebody is presumed to be a tyrant, be it a king or any head of state, it is permissible. It is, ethically permissible to overthrow with armed resistance. So when you start naming people tyrants, that's basically the code, as you're saying, this guy's fair game.
Well, I mean, but he's not hiding it. He says the fact that we have our guns is, quote, all about us protecting ourselves
from a tyrannical government of the United States. That's exactly right.
Right. So, and he pointed them in the right direction, and apparently one of, somebody, not necessarily somebody at that rally, but somebody took him seriously.
Well, I mean, Brown's rhetoric is not, uncommon among the right anywhere you go. And of course, there's quite an active patriot movement in Arizona, and the political climate in Arizona is very, very fraught right now, and I think it's very hard to discern, as I write in the piece, what if indeed there was even a coherent political ideology that Loeffner had. He's clearly a very disturbed person. But research has shown when you take a disturbed person and they're immersed in an environment that is fraught with, talk and images of violence, then, the chances of them acting on it becomes increased.
Yes, and to give you a sense of how else they were incited, I want to leave the audience with Larry Pratt's quote, again from your piece. He's, as you explained, the president of Gun Owners for America. Adele, can you tell us what Larry Pratt said on that day?
Sure. Here's Mr. Pratt, and this is a quote. "I look around. It's so good to see all these terrorists out here," Pratt said. "Janet Napolitano, she figured as governor of Arizona that we didn't have a border problem, but she knows who the real enemy is. Ha, 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 ha. And Bill Clinton's been running cover for her, too. Watch out how you guys speak out there. You know, words can have consequences." He's mimicking Clinton there. "Remember Oklahoma City? Yeah, I do. And I also remember the Waco barbecue that your attorney general gave us. Thanks a lot. We're in a war. The other side knows they're at war because they started it. They're coming for our freedom, for our money, for our kids, for our property. They're coming for everything because they're a bunch of socialists," end quote.
Gee, I wonder where they got the idea to instigate violence to protect their family, their property, their kids, etc. Adele, shouldn't we just call it even and say Democrats and Republicans are equally, and conservatives and liberals are equally guilty, as the media has been doing all day long?
You know, it's really crazy making when you hear this false equivalence made. I mean, surely you can always find some isolated nut job on either side, you know, who has, you know, made untoward comments or whatever, and that's, you know, they've been glomming on to one guy who posted something on the Daily Kos in one of these, you know, unedited diaries. But on their side, you have leaders. I mean, you have Congress people, you know, iterating this stuff. You have movement leaders. You have Sarah Palin putting crosshairs on congressional districts. You have a culture that is just fraught with the language of violence and gun violence and revolution and tyranny. And I mean, it's just totally absurd. And one other thing that I find very striking is, you know, when the right is trying to debunk the notion that their rhetoric had any impact on what happened this weekend, they always cite that Loeffner listed among his favorites the Communist Manifesto, his favorite reading. But also on that list was Mein Kampf. Now, one of my colleagues who did a wonderful piece for Alternet, a really interesting piece where he visited a Tea Party gun rally in Montana, at which Pratt also appeared. You know, he took video for us of a bookseller's table that showed the Communist Manifesto and Mein Kampf, you know, side by side, the exact same reading list that, you know, we're talking about Loeffner having had. So, and as has been pointed out by Mark Potok of the Southern Poverty Law Center and Chip Burley of Political Research Associates, I mean, the thread running through those books is that they're anti-government books.
Right. It's a witch's brew of radicalism.
Right.
And so it's
not just radicalism, but true, you know, anti-government sentiment.
Right. And shockingly enough, people across the country taking that anti-government sentiment and turning it into violence.
Yeah.
All right. Adele Stan, Washington Bureau Chief of Alternet.org, and the book that she co-edited is Dangerous Brew, Exposing the Tea Party's Agenda to Take Over America. Thank you so much.
Available only at Alternet.org.
All right, now you know.
Thank you so
All
much
right,
for having me.
We appreciate it. We will be back not only with a sports segment with Ben, we will break down the games and the controversies from this weekend in the NFL. We'll look forward to the next weekend, and then afterwards post-game as well with Sheriff Dupnick versus Fox News Channel. So a lot more to come on Young Turks.
Can see it's amazing.